It'll be all the questions I sent you.
Yep.
And then if there's like any other bits that I think of while we're talking, I'll just ask them as well.
That's fine. Yeah.
Actually, I'm just going to double check. Can I just have you speak, please?
Yes, I will speak.
Yeah. Okay. So
Is that all right?
Yeah. We've had some issues with the roads because they sometimes like to disconnect from
Okay.
this. So but no, that's definitely in that. Okay. Without any further ado, then I'll get underway.
And where do you want me to look? Look at you?
Yeah, if you look at me,
Yeah.
that's all right.
Yeah.
I'll make sure yeah, that's...
Is that okay?
Yeah.
By the way, it's been a while, okay?
Oh,
so
yeah, it's fine. Yeah. Don't worry.
I will do my best.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So I'll just start off with this. What's your full name and what was your role at Rockingham?
So my name's Charlotte Orton. When I started at Rockingham, I was doing the corporate driving day sales. And when I left Rockingham, I was the chief executive. And I had many posts in between.
And then how did you originally come to actually join Rockingham as an employee?
To do the sales for the corporate driving days. So I'd relocated back down from Leeds. I was in sales always, and the opportunity came along, and it was a great opportunity. It was, in those days, it was a Johnny Herbert Rockingham experience, so it was separate to Rockingham as a company. They kind of held the franchise for the driving days, and it was our job to go out and sell them.
Yeah. So did you kind of join Rockingham from the Johnny Herbert experience then?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it wasn't long after I joined that there was a restructure. There was a lot of redundancies made, and they brought the driving school into the fold of Rockingham.
Yeah, and I think, what year were you there from again?
2001.
2001, so you were there during the kart and ASCAR
I
era.
started literally after the kart race, literally a couple of weeks later.
Oh, okay.
But I was there for ASCAR. Yeah, and ASCAR was a really interesting time. I mean, from my perspective, where I was then, we were solely about business-to-business sales, so we didn't get involved in the motorsport side of it. But obviously, we were there selling hospitality to clients. We were there on the race days, making sure the clients were great, and it was all hands on deck, really. So you'd end up selling merchandise or helping in the diner, things like that. So it was a really interesting time to... The reason that Rockingham had an oval circuit built really was because they figured that oval racing was going to come over in the form of kart. Well, then kart kind of had a big split, and that stopped. And also the theory was that NASCAR, if it was going to come over to Europe, would probably come to an English-speaking country. So it made sense to have an oval circuit there. So alien for your traditional motorsport followers, but it was very unique.
And why do you think they never got NASCAR over in the end? Because obviously they did tempt kart, one half of IndyCar at that stage, but they had to settle with ASCAR.
Yeah, they did. So I wasn't involved in the commercial deal of kart, obviously, because I wasn't there, but I saw the fallout from it, and it was a hugely expensive exercise. And NASCAR did come over a couple of times to meet with the leadership team, but it was the financials. The commercials just wouldn't make it stack up.
And from looking back at footage, it never seemed like it fully sold out, the kart and the ASCAR sold decently well. So why do you think with racing fans it wasn't as popular as, say, traditional motorsport in this country?
Because it's not traditional motorsport. Because in this country, you are used to converted airfields, you're used to your Doningtons, your Silverstones, your Brands Hatch, where you've got your chicanes and your turns. Oval racing is a completely different form of racing. It did get a following, it really did, but it's never going to compete with your Formula Fords, Formula 2, Grand Prix, British touring cars. The home of motorsport is really based around traditional racing.
And while we're on the subject of ovals, I'm going to skip forward a bit. So when you became more involved with Rockingham, obviously you still had I don't know the official name, but you had the AS trucks essentially.
Yeah, the pickup trucks. Yeah.
Pickup trucks. So what was it like? After, obviously, in the later years, what was it like trying to market them to get people to come to the circuit to watch them? Because at one point they were your sole Oval series.
Yeah, they were. It was hard. It was there. So we actually did an oval racing, called it Oval Fest, and we tried to join up the dots of grassroots oval racing. So your banger racing all the way through to your kind of ASCAR pickups, things like that. If you're into oval racing, you would come to see the pickups. but if you weren't, we had to find another way to attract you to come. So that would be through having either live entertainment or another hook to get people to come. Ticket prices, you know, we always made sure they were really good price, very family friendly environment. So it was more than just the racing to attract the fans.
Yeah, and I'm not sure again if this is at the right stage of your involvement, but obviously there was a stage where it went from ASCAR to Days of Thunder because of the copyright issues, and then obviously at that stage you started bringing in, well, the circuit started bringing in circuits like artists, I mean, like The Darkness and 50 Cent. Do you think that was the right call at the time?
Yeah, so I was there at that point. I wasn't, it was a part of it that I wasn't involved in the decision making, but the theory was to make it quite an American style event. So you had the music and then you had the motorsport. It did work very well when you, especially when, you know, we managed to get busted. Literally, it was a bit like getting One Direction just so they'd been signed. It went bananas. And we had a load of music acts that were coming that they were more pop. The Darkness came actually because there was a colleague that worked there who knew Justin Hawkins, so I managed to get him that way. Where it went wrong was 50 Cent, because then it changed from having a music act to complement the motorsport to having a standalone music event. And it just wasn't the right artist for the right location, for the right audience, in my opinion, which is where that went wrong. It's a very expensive outlay, which didn't pay off.
Yeah, can I ask how well attended was, if you were there, how well attended was the 50 Cent?
I can't tell you exactly crowd size, but I can tell you it was far less than needed to be there.
Yeah, okay. So I'll switch across now. I think when you started working there, it was owned by the Irish Consortium Group?
No, they bought it when I was there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, were you under then free ownerships then in the time you were there?
Yes.
Yes. So,
yeah.
Can I just quickly ask what would have been the one before the Irish Consortium?
I'm just trying to think. I think it was Guy Hans still. I think it was Terra Firma that had it.
Okay, so we'll start off with him then. What was the ownership at that point? What was that like to be under?
So that's when I was more detached from any of the strategic stuff that was going on. I was very much focused on the B2B sales, but at that point it was owned by an organisation that was happy to put capital in to try and grow it and look at different ways of working, hence the music events and things like that. When that stopped, I think really was because it wasn't making the money that you would have liked it to make. So then it was sold on to property developers, where we were all absolutely worried to death because why are property developers buying the circuit? But actually it worked very well. They didn't have the extra money to chuck in from a music or entertainment perspective. They were very strategic in what they did, but they did invest in the infrastructure, such as when we had the wet grip put in and things like that. And they were very much about bringing this motor circuit in line with the community because they wanted to build a load of houses just behind it. And people don't want a really noisy race circuit. So we went through a whole process with local authorities, with planning, with the board, to find a way to control the noise at Rockingham. And actually we got there. We were allowed so many noisy days and so many days, you've noticed, kind of like road going cars and then anything in between really. There was a list of what we could and couldn't do. But that worked.
Did that, this might be a bit too late, but would that have included the C1s, or was that past your time? I know you did the C1 24-hour races, but I'm not sure.
That was past.
Yeah. So I'll go back to it then. How important then was it to get that community connection? Because I know you did other stuff as well. Because when I was younger, you did stuff with the Scouts, because we did that. I'm not sure. I think it was the time you were there. You did a thing where the Scouts could go and do a bike ride around the circuit and stuff. So how important was that?
Massively. Community was and is and should be so important. So we liaised with all of the schools, not just local, colleges, community groups. We did our very best to make the facilities available to organisations that wanted to do something. And actually, particularly in Corby, and I was very passionate about this, you had a lot of kids who kind of had glass ceilings put in place. They didn't think that they could achieve this or do this. And actually, when you bring them to a venue, and Rockingham was quite a magnificent venue, when you go in there, the infrastructure, the stadium, 52,000-seater stadium, it had a wow factor, and it really helped engage young people who perhaps were struggling on the academic side of things to look at other ways of working. So yeah, it was really, really important. In fact, it was so important we tried to get a school set up there, to have it based there as kind of like, it was at the time, it was under a Labour government, it was a studio school. It didn't come through, but we really were very keen to try and do that.
So how close was it to coming through, would you say?
I think it was politics that stopped it rather than Rockingham in terms of on the political agenda.
So would it have been what age bracket? Would it have been like the college now at Silverstone, or would it have been?
It was before Silverstone had their college, actually. It would have been secondary school up, really.
Yeah.
And what it would have been for people who needed to learn in a slightly different way, looking at the STEM subjects in particular, getting some practical work going on rather than just the theory. So that was the ethos about it, really. And we worked with some really fabulous, passionate people to do the work there. Now, what we didn't do, we didn't get the school, but we did get some funding which went to a third party who brought in these kids who were struggling and did some different ways of learning and education with them. And that, again, that was up and running and thriving when I left, and I don't think it lasted much longer after I went, unfortunately.
And I just want to go back a bit. So, I think you got higher up in Rockingham just after the ASCAR era, I think.
Yeah.
So, you were, sorry, I've gone to write it down. I think it was 2006 you were sales? Or?
Yeah, so I can't tell you the exact years, it's all documented,
Yeah.
but I went from doing the driving experience sales to then I headed up the corporate sales team, then that included then the retail sales, because at that point we did all of the gift experiences as well, so you could buy a voucher and redeem it. So looked after that, and then I went up to commercial director, which looked after anything that really had a revenue. And that included the marketing of that as well. And then from that, CEO.
Yeah. So kind of, I think it's around the time you came in was just so that role was around the end of the ASCAR period. So what was it like kind of trying to move away from ASCAR and these big concerts that you'd done before? How did you change it?
Yeah, it was very hard. We had to put a strategy in place, and basically the financial model that was in place wasn't working. It was not making money. So we were given a very clear brief from the board: this needs to wash its face. We want it to grow, we'll invest in it, but we're not chucking money into something for the sake of it. So we wrote a strategy, and actually, you had to look at the reality of the fact that we weren't a traditional racing circuit. Yes, we had the infield circuit. So, when we had British touring cars or other race events there, you did get the chicanes, you did get the turns, but it also used the banked oval. So we decided that we needed to have a couple of significant race events to keep us a live racing circuit. So your British touring cars, Formula GT, things like that. But we were going down the B2B model. So we were going down to the OEM events, the corporate events, driving days, conferences, product launches. And we excelled. We had such a small team, but such an amazing, passionate team that went that extra mile from event delivery. So then we started to grow that on repeat business, and they came back, and we would win that business from other circuits as well because of the passion and the model that we had. So that's the strategy that we took.
And did you kind of move, you said you do still have these big racing events, but did you try and make it more of I read an article, you said it was a leading automotive and testing venue at that stage, and do you think that was a successful change from just focusing on the racing?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
It was, because when you look at, it's different now, but I'm going back then, when you look at other circuits, they weren't making any money. So motorsport to a venue doesn't bring a huge amount of money unless you own the series and the sponsorship and everything else, which we didn't. So it turned us from a loss-making to a profit-making venue, which is what we needed to do to sustain.
And you mentioned the capacity just a second ago, but I wanted to ask as well, was it ever like an issue that, I know you had issues with the grandstands, was that ever an issue for you in terms of trying to think of events you could do?
No. because we had 52,000 seater stadium, and apart from a couple of global motorsport events, you don't need 52,000 seats.
No.
So actually the decision was made, the North and the South Grandstand, we just cordoned them off because they are a cost. They were a cost to maintain and to upkeep for never being used. You will have seen that we had a partnership with BMW that was for a couple of years, where they came and they launched all of their products basically at Rockingham because they had a big events calendar. And so we used those grandstands for branding, and they just had their powered by BMW logos on those. And that worked really well. But no, there was never an event that we had to turn down because we didn't have enough seats.
Yeah, and I want to move now to, so you got the Grey Rock deal through. Why did the Irish Consortium end up giving up Rockingham, and why did you feel like Grey Rock needed to come in?
Yeah, well, I didn't.
Okay.
But in terms of the board, so the company Bela, the Irish Consortium, they specifically strategically bought Rockingham to control the noise whilst they got the planning for all of the houses that were surrounding Rockingham. And that had all gone through, and they didn't need it anymore. Now, there were 4 members on that board, and one of them remained, Alf Buller, and he was the one, I think, that found Grey Rock. There was a risk that Rockingham was going to go into administration, and myself and the chairman explored avenues as to how we could acquire that venue. We believed in it so passionately, but it wasn't to be, and Grey Rock came.
Yeah, and actually I just wanted to go back to the profitability side of it. How hard was it to get that venue to be profitable in the end?
Really hard.
Because I think I read somewhere that it was 1 year where the circuit actually made a profit in its whole history. Yeah,
well, no, I think there was a couple actually, but it was really hard because we had to restructure. We didn't keep in the central services, which a lot of other circuits do, so we outsourced. So, for example, the driving experience that I said to you, we outsourced that to a partner. So we then didn't have the overall cost of the mechanics and the wear and tear on the cars. We brought the cars in when we needed them, and then they could sweat that asset in other circuits when we weren't using them. We did the same with the catering. So we did the same with the medical. So we were quite clever in terms of keeping our overheads down, but also it's just generating that revenue and turning that around. And it was hard work, because when you are pitching to the banks or to the big corporates, bring your event to Rockingham, they're like, but Silverson's down the road, we'll go there. And it took a long time to build that up. But like I say, once you built that up, that's when you would get the repeat business and they would come back.
And going back to the Irish Consortium, you said they kind of had the circuit so they could build the houses basically around it and not have any issues with it. So was that, you said obviously they invested well in it and they improved the infrastructure of the circuit, but was that ever a hindrance that maybe the circuit wasn't their main goal?
Yes, definitely. But it was done it could have been more of a hindrance. It could have been a Grey Rock earlier, okay? So it wasn't. They believed in the community, they believed in the investment, they really were very good. They just made it clear, we are not chucking money for another big concert or anything. We need to have a proper business proposal to sit down and go through, look at the numbers, and let's do this sensibly. So I think as a board, they were tough, but they were very fair.
And well, I'll move on to Grey Rock then. I feel like I know the answer to this. Were they a good investment into the circuit?
I don't think so.
No. Why was that? What was the issues that arose?
I mean, I left pretty soon after they started because it was very clear that the strategy that we had in place was not aligned to their way of thinking in terms of the development. And when you work so hard at something and you're so passionate about it, I didn't want to be involved in its demise. So that's when I decided that it was time. I had a young family. It was a good time for me to step back. But no, I think if it had been acquired by somebody else, I think it would still be thriving.
And can I go into what were the differences from your view, and what did they want?
They were just looking at purely from a development point of view. What properties can they put up? What are they going to get per square foot? Where could it go? It wasn't thinking about the asset at all.
So when you say properties, was it property like the Irish Consortium, like properties around the circuit, or is it?
It was both.
Oh, okay.
It was both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
because I know I was reading the article again, I could be wrong, but it was when it came in, the article I was reading sounded like they really were interested in the motorsport avenue of it, because I think the owner of Grey Rock, was he some racing in Formula 4?
Yeah. I mean, you get a lot of this in motorsport. You get people who've got kids who are racing and becomes a real, they can hyper focus on it because it's really important, and then suddenly when that usually young boy doesn't become a Formula 1 driver, it kind of exits and they move on to something else. But no, it wasn't following the strategy. When you know a business as well as you know it, and you know everything, you know the costs, you know the pitfalls, you know what can work, what can't work, you know whether it's going to work or not.
So when they came in, was there any consideration for the circuit, or was it just them trying to make money out of it, if that makes sense?
I think it's hard. I can't really answer that one because I left pretty soon after they came, because it was, you have to go with your gut feel sometimes, and that's what I did. So I can't really truly answer that. I think there was a nod to it, but overall it was about making a development decision and looking at it that way from their perspective.
And
in my opinion.
And I'll ask the question anyway. I assume you left because of Grey Rock, but why did you leave?
Yeah, partly because of that, because I could see that there was going to be a change in thinking, which I didn't think was going to work. It didn't work. And also, I just had my second daughter, so she was a baby, and it was just a good time to exit.
And was there, so we spoke about this time, but from early stages as well, was there any issues for you ever working at the circuit in any role apart from them?
No. What do you mean in terms?
So was there any ideas you had and you couldn't do it because of budget or anything?
Oh God, always loads of ideas because we couldn't do it because of budget. But you've got to think big and then scale it back to reality. But no, in terms of the professional way of working with everyone, not at all.
And going back to the promotion of the circuit, was it hard to promote sometimes? Because I feel like sometimes it went through kind of multiple identity stages, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So was it kind of hard to promote sometimes because it sometimes felt it didn't really know what it was?
Yeah, because it's lived a lot of lives in a short period of time, so it was. Yeah. And the other thing is, when I became responsible for the marketing of it, we had a tiny marketing budget. We really had to be thrifty and think about what we did. It was pre-social media in that extent, so it wasn't so easy to reach people. So you had to go down the more traditional methods. So yeah, it was really, really hard. And I would say it still really never got to a true identity, but the closest it did was to being a performance test and corporate experience, which would never have happened if you didn't have motorsport as well.
Yeah. But do you think the circuit was hindered by, obviously it was set up before there was any idea of the IndyCar split, and then it was obviously, there was an idea that NASCAR might want to come over here, but that never happened as well. So do you think it was wrong place, wrong time, the circuit, would you say?
I would say, if you, in hindsight, probably if you spoke to Guy Hands and said, would you finance now an oval racing circuit in the UK? I'm guessing his answer would be no.
Yeah. And actually, that's something I was going to ask as well. I don't know if you were close enough at this time, but why did Guy end up selling Kit?
Why did he sell?
Yeah, why did he sell?
I just think it wasn't giving any kind of return. It was making a loss, and I think he just wanted out of it. That's my opinion.
Yeah. And then how important were the long-standing series like British GT and British Touring Car to the venue?
Really, really, really important. Yeah, British Touring Car in particular, because it resonated with the manufacturers, it resonated with the fans. It's something that was televised. People got it, and we always did a really good job. And actually, the Alan who ran the series at the time, they really liked coming to Rockingham because it was a big deal for us. So we really went that extra mile to make it a really good weekend. And they always got a very warm welcome. So it was very important.
And how did you keep kind of Touring Cars fans entertained and keep them coming to the venue as well every year?
Well, I think partly because we marketed it very much as a family, and everything we did was marketed as family when it came to motorsport. So that kind of gave us an identity from that perspective. But we always just tried to put something else on, so you could have like just a bit of fun. Some looky likeys would have local music. Sometimes we'd do a theme for it. So people could dress up or come in, it was the 60s, so you're encouraged to drive your 60s car, and then we'd have a show and shine from that perspective. So there was lots of different ways of making it fun and enjoyable and stand out. And we did get good audiences for British touring cars, we did. Also, actually, people really liked our venue because you could see the whole circuit from wherever you sat, and that's very unique. Well,
I just sit in the grandstand all day because, that's a viewing point. You're also a bit ahead of your time as well, because obviously you're talking about these themed events, and that's only something that MSV have probably only started doing in the last year as well. So do you think that was...
We're totally ahead of our time. Yeah. I'm telling you, there were so many things that we did now, and I look around at the other circuits, I'm like, we were doing that, we could have done that, it was all in our plan. We had to be. We were like the white elephant that, an oval circuit in Corby, 52,000 seats, what are you going to do with that? Well, we had to be really creative, and we were. And the team, I can't tell you, if you could bottle that team atmosphere up and keep it with you, it was incredible because everyone was passionate about it.
And where did the idea for like the themed events come from? Because I know you, from memory serving me correctly, you did quite a few of them during the time.
Yeah, they came from everyone in the team. You would sit down and it would always be a brainstorm. Then we go and talk to British Touring Cars and say, this is what we're thinking. But if they had an anniversary coming up, then that would give us the idea. One of my colleagues, Kat, she started actually as marketing. She came from Silverstone. She started as marketing. She ended up as the head of operations. She was fantastic. She had some really good ideas. She's proper petrol head. So we just had such a diverse group who came at everything with a slightly different way of thinking. It kind of worked.
Yeah, and did it help it kind of, because I know you used to, and you said it yourself, you used to do these kind of American-style events, like themed events, and do you think that's, I know I said earlier that it sometimes struggled for an identity of the venue, but it was always kind of seen as this kind of American circuit, if that makes sense. Do you think that kind of helped in a way for the themed stuff?
I think it did, and it didn't. I think it didn't transfer across from when you had American-style racing there, it totally worked. It didn't really transfer over to when you had British Touring Cars there. It didn't help, and it didn't deter from it either. It was just, it wasn't, we weren't known for being an American circuit. We were known for having American-style racing and trying to bring that event to fruition.
And why do you think the oval racing, there was a stage in like the mid-2000s where you weren't getting decent crowd sizes. Why do you think people started to become less interested in it as the years went on?
Money.
Yeah.
So as soon as the money was taken away from the series, then you lost the teams. Money was taken away from the entertainment. It was being bankrolled. Same as anything. If you chuck enough money at something and make it brilliant, people will come. But when you say it's got to be sustainable and it's got to stand on its own 2 feet, that's when it's tricky.
But why do you think people, so obviously you still had, or you didn't have the AS-cars, but you had the trucks in the years afterwards as well. But I wouldn't say the trucks were never as popular as the AS-cars. Do you think that was because maybe some of the AS-car crowd was for the music afterwards, or was it just because people just became less interested?
I think truck racing is different to car racing, and I think partly that put people off. Then it was an oval style truck racing as well, so it was quite niche. It was great to showcase, and we did used to get it out, when we had touring cars and stuff, that would be one of the sport races. But it's tricky. It's not a mainstream sport that people can identify with.
Yeah. And what kind of things would you do, even for club events, what were the sort of things you do to keep people interested in the circuit as well? Because I remember when I was younger, it could have been touring car list, but you had there's this, I can't say the word, Scale Electrics.
In the Welcome Centre, yeah.
And then obviously you mentioned you would, I used to go to the Rockingham rally, and I think you provided the catering for that as well.
Yes, we did, yeah.
So what were those type of things, where did the ideas for those things come from, and how successful were they?
So for each different event, we'd have different ideas. So the rally was really important. In fact, that was a brainchild of Kat's. She was so passionate about it. And to attract that audience in that weather at that time, then you needed to have an offering out there. Again, it was all sustainably funded though. It wasn't something we would just bankroll. It worked as a business model. When you've got other bigger events, then we had the Welcome Centre was built just prior to BMW's agreement, and that was like the big conference room downstairs, which was brilliant for event days. So if it started raining, it was somewhere for everyone to go, but it was somewhere that you could go to interact, do the giant scale electrics or whatever it is. So it was about, but this is where you'd work with community. There wasn't a huge budget to bring anything in, so you would go out and say to people, this is what we're doing, do you want to be part of it? And it was a yes or no. So it was part of the event planning, but you know, it's going to find people that wanted to participate.
And was there much, because you mentioned it was your colleague's idea to do the rally, so what, let me ask that question again when the lights come back on. There we go. So, yeah, it's your colleague's idea to do the rally. So was there much, you did have a lot of club events there as well, so was there much thought that went into the club events that actually took place at the circuit?
Well, the club events really, it's more than just the club racing, because it was then the testing that came with it. And the track days affiliated with that as well. So my colleague Nettie, who used to look after that side of things, it was all interlinked, and Nettie would come and sit down at the beginning of the year when we were planning the calendar out for the following season, and she'd say, well, this is what I'd like to do, and actually I'm going to speak to the RSCC and the dates that they've got here, and we'd make it work, because again, as important as the bigger race events were to keep us live, the testing and the club racing was as important. So those race events didn't necessarily have the same support from a bringing in activities or theming that British Touring Cars did, simply because we had a finite budget and a small team. But the service that they got and the accessibility, you know, the state of the garages, etc., it all helped. Every person that used and touched that circuit had slightly different requirements, and we had to make sure that we delivered on those.
And do you think as well, was it, you mentioned testing, and this again might be a bit before the time, but I think one of the ideas for the circuit when it was built was for the IndyCar chassis makers / manufacturers to use the circuit as a test venue. Was that ever realised?
It was before my time,
yeah. But
I don't think so. No. There's nothing that's been started. We never had a discussion around the table saying this is a really good business, it's bringing in revenue, what can we do? Yeah. No.
So why do you think Rockingham isn't here today? What went wrong, essentially?
I think when you are running a race circuit, in particular a race circuit, you've got to have passion, and you've got to have people there that have got to be aligned to the fact that they want it to survive, and then have the creativity and the business acumen to deliver that. And I'm not for a second suggesting that this is grey rock, but if you let egos come in or anything else influence decision making, it can go wrong. And if you haven't got, you know, we work in a capital world, if you haven't got people there to nurture and deliver and grow that business, it will fail.
Yeah. And what do you think about the current state of the circuit with Cinch owning it?
Well, do you know what, actually, one of my ideas, and I think we would have got there, was to have it as an experiential centre for people to go and buy cars. I had a real bee in my bonnet that the only way you can go and buy a car is you go to a dealership. It's not fun, you don't get to test drive every model, you get sat down and talked at. And I felt that from watching everybody that came to the circuit, you know, we had partnerships with Seat, BMW, when you put them in cars that they've never driven before, a great case in point is Seat Cooper R back in the day. People are like, well, I don't want to drive that. Don't want to drive that. Actually, they were doing it to familiarise themselves with the circuit. They got out the car and they're like, that car is amazing. I had no idea. So it's so powerful for people to experience things. So the fact that Cinch have got it, I don't know what's going on there, because I have to say it was like I mourned Rockingham for so many years. I can't get too involved at looking. But if they're actually using the circuit to allow people to drive cars before they buy or things like that, it's kind of where we wanted to get to with a multi-brand experiential centre. If they're just using it for car storage, it's sad.
It's I will say, it's like they don't know what they want to do with it, from what I've seen so far, because there was a thing 2 years ago where they said, oh, we're bringing it back and we're doing like racing stuff, and they brought the like cinch stuff on the grandstands. But then recently again they've just started parking cars on the oval part. I know they were using the actual inside circuit still, but the oval they've just started parking cars on again, which is a bit of a shame. But something actually I forgot to ask you, how important were the kind of media kind of deals you did as well? Because obviously I know TV, the circuits appeared on, I think Fifth Gear used the track, Top Gear I think at a stage had used the track, I think Autocar used it a couple of years before it shut to do a big car testing event. And then I think you had a Telegraph and a Bath day, I think, as well.
Yeah.
So how important were events like
So important. PR was so important. So Sarah came aboard, she looked after our PR. She looked after local communities as well, so she was amazing. But because we didn't have a big marketing budget, what we did have was a facility. So if we had Top Gear or Fifth Gear requests to come and film, then we would take that because of the exposure that it gave us, which was really, really important. Because then when you're talking to corporates about what they can do and you're trying to describe something, say, well, look, let me show you this. This is when Top Gear were with us, and it helps. So it was really, really important.
Yeah, because, and I think was the big space behind the track as well quite important, because I know, this is my head trying to think of it, but I'm pretty sure Top Gear used it for some sort of car bowling or something.
Yeah, I think they did, yeah. So we had, so during the time, this is one of the things actually that Bila brought in. So at the outside of the circuit, you had the outer paddock, which was a really nice concrete area, which was great for car bowling, or we used to do auto tests on there and things like that, drifting.
Did you have, sorry to butt in, did you have an off-roading area as well?
We did, yeah. We've had a couple of those actually, because one got flattened because they built an outdoor exhibition showground out the back of Rockingham. So when you looked out the back of the stadium, it looked just like a huge kind of hardcore car park, but it wasn't. And we had the SED construction show that came a couple of times. And that was really good because that was, you know, sweating the asset, diversification. So that was good. And then you could use that for first drive because actually it had a lot of tarmac lanes in it, so you could recreate roads. So when your teenagers are going out in a dual control car, it was more fun. So yeah, there were ways and means to sweat the asset off the track as well as on the track. The wet grip area in the middle of the circuit, again, that could be used at the same time that all of the other circuits were being used. And you could break the circuit configurations down, so you could run 3 circuits at one time, which we did for corporate driving days, plus the wet grip, plus the outer paddock. 4x4, yeah, like I say, we had a really good one built in for BMW, then another one came. But so it was great to try and sell all of those spaces all of the time. That was the dream. Obviously it didn't happen every day, but
I know from what I remember, I know they were kind of one of the things you do at events as well, because I'd be there watching a American club event, but there'd also be like this off-roading section going on as well. So yeah, I think that was, again, so you're probably a bit ahead of your time compared to places like Silverstone and stuff that it took them a couple of years to catch up.
yes.
So what do you think for the future of the circuit? What do you think will happen?
I don't know, it's hard to say. In my heart, I hope Cinch would be a great partner to do this, actually. I've thought about it as a brand. In my heart, they could switch this circuit back on with the right leadership team in there and actually move it forward. A lot of time has gone, so a lot of the investment, and I'm not saying it probably would have gone to Silverstone, but you know, they've got this multi-brand experiential thing going on now, which is great. But I think you could do that for more of the mainstream brands as well, which would be quite exciting. So I think that there could be life there, but every year it's not used. There's a year of maintenance that's not being done. You know, you've got to look at the track, you've got to look at the facilities. So
I will say they are doing maintenance though. Because I'm part of this, I've been looking at drone footage, and there's out of turn 4 on the oval, there was this like slab of tarmac that kind of popped up like a bit of
right.
But they've like basically they've cut that whole part of the section of the circuit out and relayed it again,
okay,
which was
interesting.
Yeah. But then they've started parking cars in again, so it's again, I don't know what they're doing. But yeah, no, I think that's all the questions.
Brilliant.
So
great.
Could I just have you say into the camera, basically, I just want you to say your name, the role, and bear with me 2 seconds. So I want you to say your name, your role at the circuit, how long you've been there, and can you say you can watch Rockingham, the Forgotten Speedway on YouTube on April the 7th.
April the 7th, right.
Okay.
So I'm going to remember all of that.
I can edit it.
Okay.
I can edit it, so it's
Okay. So I'm Charlotte Orton. I was at Rockingham for 12 years and left there as the chief exec in 2013. What can you watch?
You can watch Rockingham, the Forgotten Speedway on YouTube on April 7th.
You can watch Rockingham, the Forgotten Speedway. You see, this isn't good, is it?
No, it's fine.
You can watch Rockingham, the Forgotten Speedway on YouTube on April the 7th. Do you want me to do that again?
Yes, please.
You can watch Rockingham, the Forgotten Speedway on YouTube on April 7th.
Thank you. Okay,
It's all right.
That's great.
Cool.